47 seconds ago, something happened in Senate Committee Room 216 that will be replayed on every major news network for the next week. FBI Director Kash Patel, sitting at the witness table with his usual stone-cold composure, watched as Senator Amy Klobuchar opened a manila folder and began reading names that made his face drain of color so rapidly that even the C-SPAN cameras caught the transformation in real time. The hearing was scheduled as routine FBI oversight, budget discussions, cybersecurity updates, standard operational briefings, the kind of session where senators ask prepared questions and FBI directors provide rehearsed answers designed to reveal nothing while appearing transparent. Patel arrived at 10:15 a.m., flanked by 3 FBI attorneys whose leather briefcases contained pre-approved responses to every anticipated question. The first 90 minutes proceeded exactly as his legal team had scripted. Republican senators praised his leadership, cited arrest statistics, commended his reforms. Democratic senators pressed on controversial topics, but Patel deflected each challenge with bureaucratic precision, claiming ongoing investigations prevented detailed disclosure, invoking privacy protections and national security protocols. Then at 11:47 a.m., Senator Klobuchar was recognized for her questioning time. The room's energy shifted immediately. Klobuchar had served on this committee for 12 years. She didn't grandstand. She didn't perform for cameras. When she brought documents to hearings, they mattered. The manila folder sat closed on her desk, unremarkable except for the red classification stripe visible along its edge. Patel noticed it, his eyes tracking to the folder for exactly 3 seconds before returning to Klobuchar's face. Trained observers caught the micro-expression of concern that flashed across his features. "Director Patel," Klobuchar began, her voice carrying that measured Midwestern tone that somehow made every word feel more serious. "I want to discuss FBI victim services, specifically regarding federal trafficking cases." Patel's posture remained relaxed, but his left hand moved to adjust his tie, a self-soothing gesture indicating psychological stress. "Of course, Senator. The FBI prioritizes comprehensive support for trafficking victims through our dedicated Victim Services Division." "Excellent," Klobuchar said. And something in that single word made every person in that chamber understand that Patel had just stepped into carefully laid groundwork. "So you would agree that trafficking victims deserve to have their voices heard, their testimonies preserved, and their cases investigated thoroughly?" Patel nodded confidently, still projecting the authority he would lose in approximately 60 seconds. "Absolutely, Senator. Every trafficking victim deserves justice, and the FBI is committed to pursuing these cases with our full resources." "I'm glad to hear that commitment," Klobuchar said, opening her folder with deliberate precision. "Because I have here testimonies from trafficking victims that the FBI collected but never acted upon." The shift in Patel's demeanor was subtle but noticeable. His shoulders tensed slightly. His breathing became more measured. The confident lean-back posture disappeared as he sat up straighter. Klobuchar pulled out the first document, holding it so the cameras could see the FBI letterhead, the official seal, the classification markings. "This is Victim Testimony File VT 2019-847, collected by the FBI Miami Field Office in June 2019. The witness was 19 years old when she was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein." The name hit the chamber like a physical force. Epstein. Even 2 years after the scandal, even after Maxwell's conviction, the name still carried electric tension. But this felt different, more specific, more documented. Patel's face underwent the first visible change, a slight tightening around his eyes. His hands, which had been resting casually on the table, now lay flat against its surface. "This young woman provided detailed testimony about her experiences," Klobuchar continued, her voice steady but loaded with significance. "She identified multiple individuals who participated in or facilitated her trafficking. She provided names, dates, locations, and offered to testify in court against her traffickers." The room was completely silent now. Not the polite quiet of people waiting for the next sentence, but the heavy, thick silence of people who just heard something they couldn't unhear. Klobuchar turned the page. Let me read you what she said about the first individual. She began reading slowly, her voice clear and precise. Quote, he was there multiple times. I remember him because he always wore a specific watch, very expensive. He spoke with a British accent. He told me I reminded him of his daughters. He assaulted me in the blue bedroom on 3 separate occasions in 2009. Patel's composure cracked visibly. The color began draining from his face, starting with his forehead and moving down. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His right hand moved toward his water glass, but stopped halfway. The victim identified this individual as a member of the British royal family, Klobuchar continued. She provided a detailed physical description. She identified specific conversations. She described unique physical characteristics only someone with intimate contact would know. The transformation in Patel's appearance was now undeniable. His normal complexion had turned visibly pale, the change so dramatic that even the press gallery could see it. A reporter in the back row leaned forward, recognizing the significance of what they were witnessing. Patel's hands began to tremble slightly, a shake that started small but grew more pronounced. His breathing pattern had shifted from controlled and measured to shallow and rapid. The confident FBI director who had entered the chamber 2 hours earlier was disappearing in real time. But here's what concerns me, Director Patel, Klobuchar said, her voice rising with controlled intensity. This testimony was given to FBI agents in 2019. It was documented, verified, and recommended for immediate investigation, yet no action was ever taken. Patel's mouth opened, but no words emerged. His left hand moved to his water glass, and when he lifted it to drink, the trembling was so pronounced that water sloshed over the rim, spilling onto the witness table in a way that every camera captured. Let me read about the second individual this victim identified, Klobuchar continued, turning another page. Quote, the technology executive came to the island 4 times while I was there. He always arrived in a private helicopter. He participated in group activities and specifically requested younger girls. He filmed some encounters and said the recordings were for insurance purposes. With each word, Patel seemed to shrink further into his chair. His face had gone from pale to almost gray. Perspiration was visible on his forehead under the committee room lights. This victim identified a prominent Silicon Valley CEO, Klobuchar said. She described his private jet, his security detail, specific technological equipment he brought to the island. She provided testimony that would constitute multiple federal felonies. The senator's voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the room. Camera operators adjusted their focus, sensing that history was being made in real time. Patel looked desperately at his attorneys, but they sat frozen, their usual confident demeanor completely gone. This wasn't a scenario anyone had prepared for. Director Patel, Klobuchar continued, pulling out another document, I have similar testimonies from 11 other trafficking victims, each one naming powerful individuals, each one providing detailed, verifiable evidence, each one completely ignored by the FBI. The room was chaos now, but controlled chaos. Whispers erupted across the gallery, journalists were frantically typing, committee members were exchanging looks of genuine shock. Let me read one more name, Klobuchar said, and her voice carried a weight that made the entire chamber fall silent again. This victim, trafficked at age 17, testified about, quote, the former president's advisor who visited the New York residence regularly. He always arrived late at night. He brought gifts for the younger girls. He specifically requested me because I was studying political science. He told me I could have a future in politics if I kept quiet about our encounters. Patel's face went completely white. The color drained so dramatically that he looked physically ill. His hands were shaking visibly now, and he clasped them together on the table to try to stop the trembling. This victim identified a former White House official by name, Klobuchar continued. She described his security detail, his government transportation, specific political conversations he had with Epstein. She provided testimony that would end careers and result in federal imprisonment. The weight of what was happening settled over the room like a blanket. This wasn't partisan theater. This wasn't political gamesmanship. These were documented victim testimonies about powerful people, and the FBI had buried them. Director Patel, Klobuchar said quietly, her voice now carrying absolute moral authority. These victims trusted the FBI. They came forward. They told their stories. They provided evidence that could bring their traffickers to justice, and your agency did nothing. Patel sat motionless, his face a mask of visible distress. His breathing was audibly rapid. His hands trembled despite being clasped together. "So I need to ask you directly," Klobuchar continued, "why does the FBI have detailed victim testimony naming specific powerful individuals connected to Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking operation, and why has no action been taken on any of these cases?" The question hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. 23 seconds of complete silence. In congressional hearings, 23 seconds is an eternity. It's a confession without words. Klobuchar wasn't finished. She pulled out one final document, this one with multiple red classification stamps. This is an FBI internal memorandum dated March 15, 2025, 2 months after you became director. Subject line, Epstein Victim Testimony Classification Review. She began reading, her voice cutting through the silence. Quote, "All victim testimony files related to high-profile individuals are to be classified at the highest levels. Public disclosure would create unacceptable political complications. Standard victim services protocols are suspended for these specific cases." The memo was signed by Patel himself. Director Patel, Klobuchar said, her voice now carrying barely contained fury, "You didn't just ignore these victims, you actively buried their testimonies to protect the powerful men they identified. You classified their pain to preserve political relationships." Patel's complete breakdown was visible to everyone in that chamber, his face glistening with perspiration that had formed beads along his hairline. His hands trembling uncontrollably despite every effort to maintain composure, his breathing rapid and shallow like a man in physical distress. He looked like a man whose entire world was collapsing in real time, every carefully constructed defense crumbling under the weight of documented truth. "These victims were children, Director Patel," Klobuchar continued, 17, 18, 19 years old. They trusted the FBI to investigate their trafficking. Instead, you used their trauma as leverage to protect the same powerful men who abused them. The moral weight of the accusation settled over the room like a physical force. This wasn't about bureaucracy anymore. This wasn't about classification protocols or political considerations. This was about children who were trafficked and an FBI director who chose to protect their abusers instead of pursuing justice. At 12:14 p.m., exactly 27 minutes into Klobuchar's questioning, Kash Patel's career effectively ended. Not through partisan attacks or political theater, but through the documented voices of trafficking victims whose testimonies he had personally buried to protect powerful predators. The hearing continued for another hour, but it didn't matter. The footage was already viral. The victim testimonies were entered into the congressional record. Social media exploded with clips of Patel's visible breakdown. News networks interrupted programming for emergency coverage. And somewhere, 11 young women who had trusted the FBI with their trauma finally had someone fighting for them. Their voices finally heard after years of institutional silence. Sometimes, accountability doesn't require complex investigations or months of testimony. Sometimes, it just requires one senator willing to read the names that powerful people never want spoken aloud. Amy Klobuchar had spoken those names, and Kash Patel's pale face told everyone watching exactly how damaging the truth really was.